All right, so we can go ahead and begin. So welcome everyone to Historic Preservation Board's study session on, what is it, November 16, 2020. And it looks like we are all present except I don't see Sarah and Amy, and we know where Amy is. But we'll just go ahead and jump in because we have a really action-packed agenda. We have a lot of very interesting things popping, and Andrea's got a lot for us to think about. So without further ado, I think I'm going to hand it over to you, Andrea, and we can start with your presentations.
Okay, let me share my screen. Hang on. Okay, do you see that PowerPoint there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. That's actually not the right version. Just hang on 1 second more. Oh, okay. Well, we'll just go with this if that's okay. They say the same thing. So tonight we have the second of two meetings. Oh, sorry, just a sec. Hold on. Sorry. Lost my PowerPoint. I've got two screens here, and somehow it's just being really... Okay, well, there we go. Nope, that's not where we go.
Andrea, it looks on my screen, it looks like it's just really huge. Can you hit the button at the top to minimize it? There you go.
Okay. Okay, so I think I am all ready here. Sorry about that again. All right, so yeah, as I was saying, this agenda item is intended as the second of two discussions on compiling a list of historic preservation codes, which will inform the city's project to update our historic preservation code. The first discussion was held during last month's study session, and that is where the board identified a list of communities to consider for the final list. And that was, I thought, a really interesting conversation that we had. And so came up with 15 different communities to take a look at. And that is what has been included for tonight. Let's see. So what we're doing tonight is that we're going to review the results of that initial comparison of codes, and the idea is to make a determination on which communities will be on the final list that staff will use in future study sessions where we look at specific sections of code. So what I did for the comparison is I selected 3 sections of code to compare. And what I wanted to do was really pick those sections of codes that the board uses really the most, designating structures and certificates of appropriateness. And so here you have them on the screen: historic landmarks, landmark districts, and COAs. There's a spreadsheet in your packet, which hopefully you've had a chance to look at, and it gives some information on how each one of those codes lays out. Now, I also just wanted to say, and I put this in the communication too, I didn't really see a need for the board to necessarily dig into each one of these codes. That would take a long time. And what I found was that the codes really kind of naturally split anyway into those codes that might not offer us so much versus those that did have things to offer us. And so if you haven't peeked at any of these codes individually, no worries. We'll go through what we found on these 3 different topics.
Yeah, I'd like to throw in right there and say that I started looking at all of these materials, and my intent was to get them all read, and I didn't make it all the way through. But I have to say that the information that you sent, it actually reads pretty quickly. I mean, I just read it on my device, and it actually goes pretty fast. I didn't make it all the way through, but and I don't know if anyone else did either, but it was extremely helpful, and I thank you for sending it. And Lisa, also to you, that report that you sent was really good. That was wonderful and very helpful. I mean, good job.
Yes, I'd like to thank you too, Lisa. That was really great. Okay, and I think it'll continue to be of a help to us throughout this process as well. All right, so some findings. So as I said, it was kind of easy to pick them out. Some codes were just old and they hadn't been updated in a long time. And evidently, and Rick has alluded to this in the past, evidently there was a lot of copying going on back in those days. Mm-hmm. And so you see the same wording in our code as you do in some other codes, some of those other early codes. Maybe they copied from us, and maybe Rick had found some wording to use from them, and and some of it's good, but we already kind of have that old code. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for new provisions, new ideas, new wordings. And so I'll get to maybe what some of those older codes were in just a minute, but wanted to just start off with two pieces of info that came off right off the bat here. First, Arvada does not have an HP code. Now, some of you may know that they do have a historic district downtown, but mm-hmm. it's not a historic district. It's more like a district, and they have some design standards, and they do review modifications to buildings, but it's not a COA that's issued. There's no period of significance, and property owners are not eligible for tax credits for their rehab projects. So you really don't have a historic preservation program the way we do and a lot of other communities do. And by the way, they're also not a CLG.
Oh, really? Okay.
I didn't know that. And that's fascinating because I wrote a 20th century history about Arvada, and we talked at length about how they fight over those downtown standards and how they're not allowed to do things, and how their historic district has been successful, and they talk a lot about it. And I was told they had absolutely a historic district with very strict ordinances.
And why not call it a historic district? And if they have really good design standards and they're strict, wow, that's great too. Maybe you don't always have to be a CLG. Of course, property owners can't get the tax credits and some other things, but interesting to see you can have
credits. They can still get some tax credits. They qualify for the federal. If it's on the National Register, they would qualify for federal, federal and state tax credits. Just they can't go through the CLG route of getting, like through local designation, like we can.
That's true, right? And you need to have that national designation to get that, and that really is the federal program more so than say our, what we're doing through the HP code, our local code.
And for federal, it has to be kind of a for-profit entity, a money-making enterprise. So. Yes,
right. And I think there are also some federal tax credits for older buildings that aren't necessarily designated at all. And that's kind of a lesser percentage, but that's an option up there too for people. All right, so the other one is town of Georgetown, and their entire town is a national registered district. Mm-hmm. And they don't really have much of a local program at this time that was worth considering much, because it's really all about that national register district, and of course the tax credits that come along with that. So those are two that could kind of be eliminated out of the 15 that we started out off the bat. And then I found there was a second category here of the older codes that I mentioned before, and those come up as Louisville, Golden, Loveland, and Pueblo. No real ideas or special programs of note, with maybe an exception or two here and there, which we can make note of. And I think that you'll find that in the spreadsheets that are attached in your packet, that's in fact reflected. Okay. So the remaining codes are all codes that had at least something of interest, perhaps to us, either something that we might like to emulate or something we would say, oh, interesting, we definitely don't want that, giving us a flavor of what's out there and what we might want to avoid, as well as what we might want to consider for our code. So I made a note here of some of the kind of special programs that came up on the comparison. And first of all, Boise and Fort Collins include National Register criteria for local historic landmark designation. Great idea. Next one is Aspen, and they have two different processes for landmark designation. One is for the earlier structures, and the other is for modern structures. As we know, Aspen has a lot of modern structures, and they're pretty set on trying to preserve those, as we are. But they do have a provision, or do have a regulation, that if a modern building is going to be designated, it must be the owner of the property who is the applicant.
I was going to say, I know at the CPI conference, I went to a session and somebody from Aspen spoke up, and they said they pretty much designate properties without owner consent because they are very specific about what they want to designate locally. And so they will do it over owner objection, but they will offer things to offset that. So like if an owner comes in and needs a permit for something, they might lower the permit fee or waive the permit fee or deal with a boundary issue in a way they might not normally do to facilitate that and to offset the fact that they designated over their objection, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did see it in their code, however, that for the modern buildings it appeared to be different, that in fact the applicant had to be the property owner. I imagine, I mean, I don't know. I imagine most of their landmarks, in fact, are the older structures. They've been at that
Victorian stuff,
needing those for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we do have something like a waiving of certain building permit fees for our landmark properties too. So we got a little bit of that going. All right, so let's go into Greeley. They have a section of code on how to alter a designated historic district. So every other code I saw just has a process for designated to start out with. But what if you want to modify it, which happens to be a situation that we're looking at. And so some of the questions that have come up that I've been looking at in our process have been actually addressed by Greeley. We wouldn't have time to get that in place before we move forward with ours, but it could be something to think about for us in our code. And then finally, Boulder. They require that for any new historic district, that design guidelines be adopted in conjunction with designation. So same night, new historic district, design guidelines. Seems like a good idea. A lot of work on the front end, however.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could spend a lot of time putting those design guidelines together, and I guess potentially the district isn't approved by the council. I guess that would be a downside. But in any case, I thought all of these were kind of gems, and there's some more out there as well. So I thought that was actually pretty successful. And then the other great successful thing about this is that, and maybe some of you knew this, but I didn't realize in about 2007 that SHPO created this model code. And as I looked through it, I really thought it was terrific. Erica Duvik, who listened in on the board's meeting last month, she said that the code has been reviewed and tested, and we can feel really confident about it. And I feel, our staff feels that this could serve as an excellent base code for us.
You know, Andrea, I read through it, and I have to tell you, it was like reading Code for Dummies almost. It was that you could understand everything as you read through it. I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I agree. And yeah, so if that's kind of the feedback we get from the rest of you, I'm thinking that that's the way to go. We use it as a base, and we look at our other codes and get other ideas, customize it as we see fit.
Does anyone have any comments about that? Did you have a chance to look at that particular code, the model code? Yes, Chris.
I skimmed it. I didn't have time to read it in depth because I worked this weekend. But obviously the point of customizing it, because they start with a 50-year threshold. And I know ours is at 40, and I'd like to definitely keep it at 40. I think we're going to lose a lot of stuff if we start out at the 50-year threshold. And I know that the spreadsheet shows that Aurora doesn't have a minimum age, but they do have it at 50. And there was a property that they were waiting to designate until 2021 because it's, like 3 months shy of being 50 years old, which to me is just silly when you're that close to it. So I think 40 is a good starting point.
Yeah. I like that provision in our code. And yeah, there are some codes that have no minimum age. And Chris, I'd like to talk to you about the Aurora Code because I found 2 different ordinances on the web.
Everything I'm seeing in the spreadsheet, I'm like, no, that's not true. There's not 48 landmarks. There's not.
Well, I must have had the wrong one.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm not sure what they're doing, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there were 2 separate ones up. It was confusing. I made a call, but didn't hear back from them. Okay. So yeah, maybe we can work on that together. But at least based on the information, whatever it is, wrong information I got, I did feel that they had something to offer to us. And so the codes that staff is recommending up here on the screen include Aurora, Boise, Fort Collins, Longmont, Aspen, Greeley, Boulder, and of course, then the Chabot's model code.
I think that's awesome.
So yeah, I think, go on.
Well, I just wanted to say about the model code. One of the things that I really liked about it, it felt to me like I was also reading a template that you plug and play, and I felt that it was a very cohesive document. And if you followed that and customized it for your own city and put in your circumstance, I think you would wind up with a very cogent code that flowed and felt like it all went together. And I liked that a great deal. It was a great model. It really is.
Okay, so the way I see this discussion going on from here is if board members have more to discuss and about the various different communities. Last month's discussion was very interesting. Let's go for it. The other option is to kind of narrow down on what the list is here and what the communities that I sort of didn't include and see if the board maybe wants any changes.
Does the city, does the council want a certain number of codes to look at, or did you just settle on the number 8, these 8 codes, because those are the ones you wanted to look at?
So the council didn't give specific direction to us on that. They, the direction that we got was that they wanted to include Alamo. Well, actually, that was on the historic district, but the historic preservation code, actually, they haven't given us, they haven't given us direction on that, because as of now, it is the consultants that are working on it, and we will be helping them a lot with their work on the HP code.
In your opinion, is it better to give them more information or less information? Would it be better for us to narrow it down a bit more or not? Because I'm okay with the 8 that we've got. I think for me, it's the more information, the better. But if you're using a consultant and maybe more information is just more information, then do we need to cut down the number of cities?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. I think that we actually turn over an entire draft to the consultant.
Okay.
So we're looking at these codes for our use. really, and creating a code for the consultants to, I guess, consider or use or whatever.
Yeah, they're for our use in modifying that. What I see is modifying that model code, and we come up with it. We turn it over to the consultants, and they may have some insights for us. Hopefully, a lot of people will be taking a look at this draft that is produced, and we go from there on getting it in a position that's ready to be part of the ULUC draft code that goes out for public review.
Yeah, I think starting with SHPOs, if people don't have an objection to it or like this concept, starting with those bones, that skeleton that we get to populate, it saves us from basically reinventing the wheel.
Right.
And it might speed our process and be helpful to us. I don't know how others feel about that. Having personally never written a code, it seems to me that would be a nice place to start.
I'll tell you how I feel, having written 3 codes. I just say we adopt this code, like Andrea says. We go through it, we change it to meet the Littleton's criteria. I've read the whole thing already and annotated it. I don't think we need to look at all these other codes either. I think if we go look at the document that Lisa prepared for Fort Collins, it has everything in there on all these cities already. So why look at another code when that document very clearly describes all the actions and how this, and what I liked about it was how the city preservation commission agreed or didn't agree. The primary areas I see in this code that we need to work on would be the criteria area and our certificate of appropriateness, because there's a lot more detail that you need to do, but they even recommended that in the Fort Collins review. But I'm all for just taking this code because it withstands the law. And that's why they're written. And I was reading about other things about these model codes, and they're written to withstand going to court. And if we follow that, we don't have anything to worry about in our city because it's all about procedure and they cover all the procedures that are in there. I think there's a couple of sections we might want to add that they didn't have that I read about, but other than that, I would, and I've made a list already of what should go in there, but I would just rewrite that whole, just take it and just change it to city language and go.
I have to agree with Rick.
Andrea?
Yes.
When did you say that the SHPO's model code was created?
About 2017.
Yeah.
Oh, so just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you said 2007. I was.
No. 2017.
That would have been waiting for its time.
Yeah, it has everything in it. I was checking other codes around the country, the Park Service, comparing what the Park Service says you should have in a code, some other communities. It has everything in there except a couple items we might want to talk about. But other than that, it covers the whole basis. And it has things in there that were removed from our code that need to be in there so we can add them back in. The other thing I liked about it was, we have to discuss this, but they embed the National Park Service Secretary of Interior standards in the code. We don't even have to adopt it. We adopt this code, we adopt it all at once. And I think that's really a good idea.
I think that's a good idea too. I agree.
Lisa, do you have something? Are you raising your hand?
I wasn't raising my hand, but I was just, I agree that the model code is a good starting point. I didn't look at it in as much detail as I would have liked, but one thing I noticed just from a passing was that it doesn't really have a lot of the information about kind of the difference between minor alterations and major alterations, like things that would and things that would be administrative. It really focuses on like everything being approved by the commission. And I think that's different than the direction that we've talked about before. So I really like how, Andrea, that you've picked kind of like good little tidbits of all these other codes that maybe we could integrate or think about how to adapt for Littleton, and then kind of using the framework of the model code to input maybe some of these more innovative or specific items into.
Yeah, and I think that's really my point, that we wouldn't be like, for example, criteria for certificate of appropriateness. We wouldn't be sort of looking, oh, wow, how many should we have? And how are we going to word all of this? We would take that model code, start with that. If there are any other of the codes in the group that we choose that have something interesting and different, I put that in part into a communication that goes to the board, so that you're not looking at all of the codes, you're reviewing the potential add-ons or customizations that we could consider.
Absolutely. Lisa, your report was rather long, and at the end, I've read too many codes by the end. But what I noticed about Fort Collins, they go into a lot of detail about the COA process and in many different aspects of how to review that and comparing it to the different cities. So I think our answers might be right there. I think the model code's built to cover the legal aspects, but not necessarily all the process aspects that you'd want in a community. So we have to add all the process parts, how the city departments work together, how we work with the community. But I think it would be easy to fit in there. And then we don't have to worry about all the back end and really the front end. You're just dealing with the middle. And by remodeling this, Andrea can then point out where we have to spend our time. We can just focus right in on there.
Right, so, we'll be focusing. The board won't be looking at the whole thing. So we'll definitely focus down onto specific areas.
Well, it sounds like we have just, leapfrogged down the road with this. I think this is great. I love the direction that we're talking about right now.
I certainly do. And I really liked what Andrea, the graph, the spreadsheet you put together comparing all the codes was really good. And so we can highlight some of those things in there as well. But it would give us a very defensible code. Ashley wouldn't have to spend a whole lot of time reviewing it legally, because it's already been reviewed legally by, I'm sure, the state attorneys and everybody else. So, and what I like about it is it starts standardizing things across the whole, not only the state, but the whole country, because all the national laws apply to everybody the same way. You just don't want to have to end up getting there. So.
And I think there's one other code that we should consider that actually has a lot of good things in it, and that is our code. I've read through our existing code that Andrea sent out. And when I joined the board, I guess it was, 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I read our code. And I'll tell you, I read it with different eyes this time. And things jumped out at me that I didn't realize were even in our code. And we've got some pretty good stuff in there that, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater on this one. I mean, there are good pieces of our code, I think, that we want to, good provisions that we want to pick up and make sure we include.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Thanks for, making that point.
So, okay, how are we, what's next now that we've decided, bada bing, bada boom, that this is what we're going to do?
Well, let me just ask one more time then. The list that you see here, plus Littleton's, is the list that we will use as we just discussed. Okay. All right. Well, then let's just move to next steps. So staff will be bringing you over different study sessions, some sections of code. The staff communication will lay out what the model code is and what some other ideas so we can discuss. And that will happen during the first quarter of 2021. And those sections that will include are yet to be determined, although I expect the 3 that we already looked at will definitely be 3 that we use, and probably 1 or 2 more sections as well.
And Andrea, is there anything that you would like from us during this period, in the next, I guess, 6 weeks, 2 months?
No, I think staff takes it from here. And, but thank you for asking. I know the board is really very busy on the downtown historic district and other things. And this will be something that staff works on and brings to you as early as January.
Excellent. I guess if, in further readings, if anyone, looks at or any of these codes and something jumps out at you, just jot it off in an email to Andrea to make sure that she's aware of it.
Great.
So yeah, this sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
I made a list of stuff already. I can send it to everybody if you want to look at it and on what to add to this code. Assuming Littleton's the base and we move Littleton's language into this code and then move forward. There were a couple of sections that
sounds good.
The model code did not cover. It didn't cover demolition by neglect. And I don't know why it didn't do that, but that was one thing that Elisa's group recommended Fort Collins puts into their code, was the demolition by neglect.
I think that's important too.
Yeah.
They might have not included it because it's usually within a different part of the city code. Usually.
Yeah.
Safety section or something.
There was something called the servability clause I read about. And I think that's a question for Ashley. And I can't remember, it has something to do about if one part of the code is someone in one part of the code doesn't agree with what's going on, or they have an issue with the code, the servability clause allows you to continue to keep the code in place and only deal with that one part. And that wasn't in the model code either. And I think that's something that the lawyers would talk to us about. We have historic districts, so the model code doesn't deal with districts. So we want to probably have a separate section on districts. Right now, the districts are embedded in the middle of the code. And that makes it really hard to use the code because a city's not just about districts, it's individual buildings. Then the last one, which is very interesting, and we've talked about, is adding other land use options. And in Lisa's group recommended for Fort Collins, and I've read it elsewhere, historic overlay districts. And I kind of like this historic overlay district idea because you can identify areas of the city that are historic in nature, but you're not designating any properties, but lets everybody know that we are talking about significant resources. And right now we're beginning to look at the corridors, and Littleton Boulevard could easily fit into a historic overlay district with all the resources we have there. So it's something that hasn't been addressed. And then conservation districts we haven't talked about. Another way to preserve an area without necessarily designating it. And those are new things people are talking about. So I think we should look at those things in our code as well as we move forward. But I have a bunch of other things. I'll just send them to Andrea. They're just minor things. But one thing I was looking at is how this code can interface with our Building Board of Appeals and the Board of Adjustment. They may look at properties that we are interested in and we won't know about it. And that's a organization issue within the city department. The city has not adopted the historic building, there's chapter 12 of historic buildings for the International Building Code. We might want to talk about that. But what was most interesting that I read, and Lisa again pointed, I think it was in your review, is most of these codes stand alone, but we're going to the land use code, and there's a different way to integrate all this into the land use code that I've read in other cities, such as San Antonio. And I would assume, Andrea, maybe that's what the intent would be for Littleton as well. Instead of having this stand alone, maybe integrate it within the entire land use code.
I believe the idea is to keep it as its own chapter, which frankly I appreciate, because you can read through it, and especially for someone who's considering being in a historic district or designating their property, it's hard to jump around.
It is, and I agree. And then so I'll just send my comments to you, Andrea, so you can begin. But there's a few other definitions we may want to add, but I think it's much better than our current code, though. And I can say that since I wrote the current code and with the modifications. And we did, in 2012, remove some things from the code that should be in the code. So they'd all get back in with this. So it would be good.
Yes, Andy. And
yes. Rick's throwing out some ideas like that, I'll throw out too. I'm interested in, Andrea, what you and the group thinks about using 1041 regs, and if we need to use something like that. I don't know if other government property owners in our district or potential districts, I just don't know where they're at as far as following our rules for their buildings. And so if you think that's an area where we may not have agreement, 1041 could be useful.
You want to explain to the group 1041?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1041 regs, they're actually in the statute called areas and activities or matters of state interest. And they're basically an overlay permitting tool, but where they're a little unique and different in how they've changed over the years is you can use them to hold other governments, state and local, to your standards where you might not be able to otherwise. So I don't want to make a problem where there isn't one, but I just wanted to at least throw that out in case there's any concern. And I don't know, others may be able to say more. Lisa, you can chime in if you want. Okay. It's an interesting, it's this permitting system, and it's an interesting tool that I think a lot of communities are using for a variety of reasons, but I don't know of any that have used it for historic resources, but it's been there in the statute since the 70s. So
I will talk to Ashley about it and get back to the group.
I think there's one area, Andy, bringing this up with what little you just told us, that could be useful to us. And that has to do with the Fire Metro District and South Metro Fire. They have their own codes and they do their own thing, not necessarily in the interest of cities. And they have the last say many times on occupancy of buildings. And that might be one area where we can protect some of our buildings, perhaps from overzealous fire professionals. And I know they can cause a lot of issues with buildings. So, and now that the fire isn't Littleton, it's a much bigger group, bigger area. Their emphasis towards preservation could be a lot less than it would have been in the past. So maybe that's a good idea to do that.
And in this case, are you talking about them as owners of the buildings, as the applicant?
As code officials, code review officials.
And I'm not sure if it works in that way. I'd have to go back and look at that, but I think it's really meant for, like, trying to remember now, what they're used sometimes to hold, like some of the West Slope communities have used 1041 regs to hold Front Range cities to different standards to protect their water. Or like against CDOT, I think CU used it for CDOT. So I feel like I'm trying to make something where there may not even be a problem. So I don't want to do that. I just am throwing that out there since you were talking about overlays and other tools.
I think it's good to use it for Santa Fe Drive improvements. Protect Littleton's interests. That wouldn't be part of our code, but it could be part of the land use code.
Yeah, that's a very good point. With several of our corridors, they're really not our corridors per se.
Okay.
Do we have any more discussion on this particular topic?
No, I think it's great. I think we got a great approach and saves a whole lot of time. It's really good.
Yeah, that's really nice. Andrea, you have to be happy about that, because this is a huge project, a lot on your plate. So this is going to help.
That model code was great. I was so happy to find that.
Andrea, thank you for putting all this stuff together. I did actually read everything because I have nothing else to do these days. It was very interesting. The CLG requirements. I mean, just there's a lot of stuff we have to tighten up in our community to make it really, really good, because we have a whole lot of resources in this city. I mean, we're going to have hundreds. We have hundreds of buildings that will be listed and designated in the end. Several historic districts, so which is good for the community. So, yeah. But this is great.
Yeah. Board members might want to either download those documents or remember where they are as we move forward through the code process and beyond. I think those documents can be a great reference.
Yes. Well, I am working with my iPad, trying desperately to get back to our agenda, and I'm being unsuccessful. So can we move to the next item on the agenda? And I do not know what it is, because I can't get.
It's the 1997 Downtown Historic Survey update.
Oh, great. Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, Andrea, I'll kind of throw that to you to introduce what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so as you know, with the Downtown Historic District, the board has established 3 work groups. And work group 1 consists of Chris Geddes and Rick Cronenberger. And they have been meeting, and I've been meeting, and others of you have helped out. I know Kim and Andy have helped out on doing the surveying, and they've been at it for 3 months now. There have been a couple of setbacks. It's taken us a long time to get the tablet and the software pulled together, and that's still not quite done. And we have some remaining questions, and there might be a little bit of moving around of how we work through these 3 work groups. But in any case, these 2 have done a tremendous amount of work. And I want to thank them and everyone who helped them, because it's just really terrific. It's just a great service that they've done for us.
They really have. And big applause for Chris and Rick and Andrea with all of this. It was fantastic.
So at last month's meeting, Chris showed slides of some of the buildings from Alamo. And at this point, all of the buildings on Main and Alamo have been surveyed, with the exception of the new structures, Littleton Mixed Use, Littleton Tavern, and some others. And we will be getting to those. But Chris is going to give a presentation on the Main Street properties. And we're going to be, I believe, well, she can take it from there, but there's going to be some discussion about how buildings have changed in the historic district and beyond.
All right. Can everybody see the screen?
Not yet.
Share screen. Oh, there we go. How about now?
Yes.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay. So Rick and I have, gone through the downtown with different people. I think Andrea might have mentioned it in some of the material that it went out. It was, him and myself, and then Rick and Kim and Andy and me. And so we've kind of had a mishmash of people kind of going through and looking at things, and kind of, you see different things with different people. So kind of compiling notes. And then Rick was gracious enough to assemble all those different comments into a spreadsheet, which I think was sent out to everybody. Did that go out yet?
It's not
Rick
done yet,
Andrea?
but Andrea included it in the packet.
Okay, so yeah, so kind of that whole synopsis of information that we accumulated. So we had the survey methodology where, we had to look at the physical changes, and that's basically the integrity of the resources in the downtown district and kind of outside the district, because we're looking at expanding it. And this is, in comparison with what was documented in 1997 by Tom and Lori Simmons with Front Range Research, and was kind of the precursor to all of this, and created the National Register Historic District, as well as the, what went on to be the local landmark district, which is the opt-in district. So because of the time crunch with this project, we ended up getting printed copies of the survey forms and just kind of making notes on that. And then Rick took all of that information and put it into the spreadsheet. We just kind of made notes about different things we saw. The one challenge that we did have in looking at all of these was that with the 1997 form, it's a photocopy and there's one picture on there. But in going through, the district and the surrounding streets over the past couple months, we can kind of walk around the building, and, we have the iPad, and we took multiple angle pictures. And so, when you only have a straight on facade view of the, from 1997, but now we're looking at the side and we're like, well, we can't really tell if this window's changed or if that's changed. So there were a couple times where it was kind of challenging to see, if there had been an actual change, or if that was something that was extant in 1997. So we did the best we could. We took new photographs of each building, and sometimes we took multiple photos, especially if something was on the corner. Besides just doing Main and Alamo, we ended up deciding that, if the downtown district boundary is expanded, to the south side to Alamo, then you have the cross streets of, Prince and Sycamore and Nevada, and there's some really great resources on those streets as well. And so we went ahead and just looked at those in addition to Main and Alamo. And then, here's our teams that went out together. And then we have all that information in this spreadsheet to kind of look at the integrity of each building. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this next month with the presentation on significance and integrity, because that's going to be key for us going forward as to how we look at the district, what buildings would be contributing and non-contributing. And, you have to start with significance, and you have to look at integrity, and you need to have both. And, we have a downtown district, it's mostly commercial. We look at Alamo, we're kind of including some other stuff in that, but it's going to be significant for commerce, is kind of the obvious thing, and probably some architecture, but we were kind of looking mostly at the integrity. And so when you look at the spreadsheet, it kind of shows all the basic information, address, and we decided to do the historic and the current name, because not everybody knows these buildings as well as Rick does. So you can't just throw out a name and instantly know what it is, like he does. And so we decided to include both names. year construction, if there was an architect, all that kind of stuff, that would be useful if we were going to be doing some searches by certain fields. And then if there was any kind of National Register eligibility indicated, we decided to include that. The main part of this spreadsheet was the brief description of the physical changes, kind of a field integrity assessment, and knowing that work group 2 was supposed to be dealing with the contributing and non-contributing assessments. We're still looking, we were physically looking at the buildings, and so in any event, we kind of had to make some sort of assessment as to whether things had changed or not. And so we made a comment regarding that integrity assessment. And then we ended up adding a column for the COA to assist Andrea kind of going forward with having that information in there, and kind of what was done as part of that COA. So that was that. Just want to throw out a definition for integrity because not everybody might be familiar with it. But it's those physical characteristics. So, the bones, the walls, the materials. So I guess you could, there's always these arguments about like recreated buildings and how much integrity do they have? And we're not going to go that route. For our intents and purposes, this definition is more than sufficient, but it's the survival of those physical characteristics that existed during the property's historic or prehistoric period. And I would say period of significance. If we're looking at the downtown district and we have a period of significance, from like 1880 to 1955, or we're going to expand that, then the materials used to construct this building should mostly represent that time period. And we'll talk more about this next month with the presentation on significance and integrity. I was told this might not be the best slide to start out with, but it's too late, it's already in there. So this is one that if you don't see this other picture from 97, you don't really know that all of that is back there. But this did receive a COA. This is more of a question not to change anything on this building and its role in the district, but maybe more of a food for thought question as we move forward with how we're going to address COAs and work that is done to buildings that, would this be a contributing or non-contributing building to the downtown district if this were happening now? Because there have been some changes to the building, but they did receive the COA, and so they did that in good faith and the way they were moving forward. So just something to kind of think about as we move forward.
Andrea, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to just say that actually the Skelly station is not in the district, and it did
not okay.
Yeah, it did get approval for that through the Planning Commission. It went through a Planning Commission approval process, and it was actually at the time it was there were a lot of people that were passionate on both sides about whether it should be in the district or not.
Okay. And again, like, we're not looking at like trying to change things that, have already passed through the process. This is more of just kind of a, as we start looking at all these different things that we're dealing with the downtown, expanding the district, updating the code, revising the criteria, we need to think about what we want in the district. So.
Yeah, I think this is a very good exercise, actually.
Yeah, so it's not saying that it's good or bad or wrong or right or any of that kind of thing. It's just food for thought. And then we have the view house, and I look at this picture multiple times, and there is like the building's intact, the original building. There is a large addition. It's set back, on top. So again, just things to be thinking about as we move forward and are updating criteria and code and all of that stuff that there are things that we should be paying attention to as we move forward. But some of the other buildings that that we need to kind of look at, and this one I have the wrong term there. It's not restored. It should be rehabilitated. And there's a difference between restoring a building, because when you restore a building, you restore it to a very specific time period, and everything is specific to that time period. A rehabilitation is more of like an adaptive reuse, where there might be some changes. It might be because of ADA issues. It might be because of, materials that have, been removed and are trying to be, reapplied, or, disintegration of materials, any one of those things. But their adaptive reuse is akin to rehabilitation. And so this one should be that the building was rehabilitated. But you can see that, they kind of took off the pent roof here that was added at a later time, probably in the 70s. They've restored some of the openings. The windows are more like they should be, but there have been some changes to accommodate the new businesses that are in there over time. And that's something I do want to bring up to everybody, that all of the buildings, if you go through and look at them like we all did, every building in downtown and even on Alamo has had some kind of alteration, even in the past 20 years or since they were constructed. No building has exactly all the original fabric and every original window. And especially in a commercial area, every tenant that comes into a building needs to adapt that building to their business. And so we're always going to see some kind of change to a commercial building. And we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at integrity assessments, that we might have to be a little bit more flexible with how we look at commercial buildings and how they contribute to the district for that very reason, because they are going to go through a significant number of changes. So keep that in mind as we look at photos and move forward with the downtown district expansion. The Coors block went through an extensive restoration, and so here you kind of see the exact same view, and it looks good. And again, when you look at pictures from 20 years ago, you can see window openings are the same. Details like the corbelling, the corner post, and the corner entry, all still there. The segmental arch windows, stone sills, all of that is still there. Storefront windows. This is one of the side streets, so Nevada. And we talked about this building last time because Andy and I just drool over it, but this is one that, retains integrity. It reads the same, from 97 as it does today. And probably if you looked at photos that go even further back to when it was originally constructed, it would look the same. And, I think this is one that we should absolutely look at individual landmark status for. I don't know of any other Art Moderne buildings in the area, and this would be a fantastic addition to the local landmark list. But certainly, as we're looking at district expansion, it contributes to the district, in my personal opinion. And I think as we move forward, the next work group will be finding that as well. This is the Harry Post building, or as we all know it as the Penny Robbins Dancewear. Again, it's not necessarily architecturally outstanding building, but when you compare the photos, it really hasn't undergone any changes in that time period. So it retains the integrity. It would be interesting to find some historic photos of this building, maybe at the museum library, and see if we have anything from when it was constructed to kind of compare that and see how it looks prior to 1997. But if we're just looking as we were from 1997 to today, it hasn't undergone any changes. Let's see. We also looked at Rapp Street, and I know this is kind of a little outside the district area, but you know, oddly enough, the Little House is not locally landmarked, and we do have a few buildings along that little stretch of Rapp that were surveyed as part of that downtown area. And just wanted to kind of show you another one right outside of the downtown district. And this one, you know, they've removed some of the landscaping, and they put in a driveway because now this is, instead of being a residence, is a hair salon. But, you know, everything is all there and intact. Had a paint job, so it looks, you know, a little bit more cleaned up. Other than that, has all the original materials there. And so our next steps, you know, looking at the integrity of each building, kind of outside the downtown district, in addition to, you know, assessing the downtown, but looking outside, especially where we're considering expanding, or, you know, the city council ultimately will make that decision. But what our recommendations will be as far as, you know, a boundary for district expansion. As I think Andy mentioned at the last meeting, you know, the public outreach is a really important component of this. And we really, you know, need to look at involving not only the current district owners, but potential owners in that expansion area. We really have to have everybody on board with this. As Andrea mentioned, we're still working on setting up the software for on the tablets. And once we do get that set up, we can get this information input into the new tablets and then uploaded to the database. And that can also assist other departments who might use this data, whether, you know, it's community development or there's a permit issue, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different uses for this data that we are acquiring, and so we can share with other departments. And so at some point we will get that information into the tablets, and then we can also start surveying other resources outside of the downtown district as well. And then the recommendation of the new district boundaries by the city planning staff. And we will work obviously with Andrea on that as we move through the next two work groups before it goes to city council. And that's where we're at.
All right, well, Chris, thank you so much. To you and to Rick, a tremendous amount of work went into this, and a tremendous amount of value came out of all of that work. So it's all much appreciated, and you know, it again puts us further down the road towards our task of assessing historic districts downtown. I think that one of the things that you mentioned, Chris, is the information that can be in that database and made available to anyone in the city. Because I think one of the things that we've talked about several times is being able to flag buildings, so that if this building winds up on anyone's desk for a permit or just any kind of question within the city, the person on staff that's handling that will recognize that this is a significant building. And you know, that can help to inform decisions. Yes, Andrea.
Yeah. We actually do have a software program through our building department, and all designated landmarks and properties in historic districts are identified. And so when they pull up a particular property, if it's designated, big red letters, restrictions. So we do have something in place, but I think what we have here is really going to enhance our GIS system, which is actually relatively new to the city, GIS, and that can really expand to all departments for use in long-range planning, for public works projects, all sorts of things. And so this is something very new and be really very appreciated.
Great. Well, thanks for clarifying that, Andrea.
Well, and I know in Denver, you know, a lot of the information that we're acquiring is helping the City and County of Denver Planning Department with neighborhood plans and planning initiatives. So obviously on a much smaller scale here, but certainly useful information without question.
All right, very good. So let's see. Okay, so we're through that, the study session topics. And I think, you know, we do need to talk about next steps and study groups that are kind of firing up next. Do you want to do that now, Andrea?
You're on mute, Andrea.
Thank you. I think there's going to be a little bit more work going on with work group 1. In fact, Chris and Rick and I are meeting later this week. And there's going to be some more on significance and integrity coming up. And that'll be great to keep that going and finish that up. Meanwhile, we're going to start getting going with work group 2. And so far, Laura Gabriel has signed up for that, and wondering if there's anyone else on the board at this point who is interested in doing work group 2, which is, as was mentioned before, it's determining district boundary and contributing and non-contributing buildings. I think it's a little less work than what work group 1 did, but I think it should be very interesting, and I'll be involved in that work group as well.
Well, it's also, it's very important work, because it is looking at the boundaries of the district and determining, you know, when you look at integrity and the whole question of contributing and non-contributing, I mean, those are big questions. It's very, very important. And, you know, there's a wealth of information to work with the work that Chris and Rick have done. And also Andrea is, you know, knows all and sees all when it comes to that kind of information. So it's going to be, I think, a pretty incredible experience to work on this project, and you know, to actually, quite frankly, learn a lot from Andrea, because she does know this very, very well. And Laura is on this committee. We have room for one other HPB member to work on this little group of 3, Andrea, Laura, and someone else. So if someone else would like to, you know, jump in and decide to be a part of that, that would be great. And did I see a hand?
Yes, please.
What's that?
Yes, I'd like to join along with Laura on helping establish those boundaries and the contributing and non-contributing.
Oh, that's great. I think you'd be a fantastic addition, David, because you know, you do bring the architectural knowledge to it. And did David jump in front of anybody else? If not, sold, David. So
okay, then.
That's a great group.
Yeah. So I will contact the 2 of you tomorrow, and we'll figure out a time for the 3 of us to have a Zoom meeting and figure out what we're doing and figure out a schedule to do it.
Yes, that's fantastic. I'm jealous. So, Laura, did you have something? Okay. All right. Well, that is fantastic. That's very, very good news. And it looks like we've had the kind of next step on that. So now I guess we're down to section number 2 of our study group, and that is comments and reports, basically from staff around the city. First up is Community Development Director, Mike. Going once.
I'm here.
There it
is. Zoom meetings, it's tough to like find the right buttons and everything.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank everybody who participated in the studio session earlier this month, just last week, as a matter of fact. And I appreciate all the involvement you've had in that. The next studio is going to be on December 14th. So please mark your calendars for December 14th. And we'll do the second focus on corridors and mixed use. And that is all I had.
All right, I'd like to ask a question about that. I did participate in the studio, and I thought it was wonderful. But one thing I noticed is there wasn't a heck of a lot of public participation. And it's kind of round up the usual suspects. You know, you see the same faces from the public, and I think I don't know how many people participated, but I'm thinking my hands and toes might have covered off on most of them. So how many people participated, and what are plans to kind of get more public participation?
Now, I think we had about 70 participants again, which is, like you said, kind of the usual number of participants, and that includes staff members and members of boards and commissions. We've been trying to advertise on the website, obviously, but I can bring that up with the community services director and see if we're doing any additional efforts to bring in new voices or people that we haven't heard from in the past. And I think that is important because there are a lot of people that maybe haven't had a voice to this point. And that's one of the reasons I brought it up in tonight's meeting, in case anybody out there is listening and would like to participate. We would love to have additional participants and different voices to be heard.
I think that's important. Lisa, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna add a couple comments to that. I did attend that also. And one thing I noticed was, and I think this is just how virtual meetings are, it's hard to hear from everybody because there's like the awkward silence where you're waiting to see if anybody else is gonna talk and like unmuting and all of that. And in my group, at least, it wasn't really told to us like whether we should put our feedback into the chat or like take advantage of any of the Zoom tools. So I think at the next one, it would be helpful if it was maybe people got the option to put in that feedback in the chat with stuff that I've been doing for work. That's been actually really helpful because you hear from a ton more people if you kind of open it up to that sort of side conversation also. And I know I can't remember when the first one was, maybe April or May. I remember that the consultants had integrated polling into that. And then this one didn't have the polling. So I think just more use of the pretty simple technological tools we might hear from more people that are actually there.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, and we've been kind of scrambling a little bit since COVID to, originally these were all intended to be in person. And we've been scrambling a little bit, and we did do polling earlier. This last studio, we tried breakout sessions, and I'm not sure if I was in a breakout session with anybody on HPV, but the one I was in went very well. And it was a smaller group, and we heard from quite a few folks, and I'm not sure what the format of this next one is going to be, whether we'll do breakout sessions again or a different method, but we're trying to engage people on a personal level, and I appreciate that feedback.
You know, I noticed, I've been in every one of these meetings, and there are about maybe 12 new people that I didn't recognize their names on this one. A couple of people that I suggested participate. You can't force people to participate, unfortunately. I think we should tell our friends to be involved, but the city advertises this everywhere. It's in the city report. I mean, emails go out. I mean, there's a big email list. A lot of people don't want to sit there for an hour and a half on a Zoom meeting and deal with this. It's just really hard and tedious. If we had personal meetings, I think before COVID, we had a lot of people attend some of these presentations that were put on during the Envision study. All I would say is find people that you know that have an interest and get them involved. I mean, what else can you do? Public participation is by volunteerism. You can do it or you don't, and you can't complain if you don't. But there's no excuse for not knowing what's going on in Littleton, because everybody gets all these reports and stuff.
Yeah.
So, and it is
you
heavy.
Have something?
Yeah.
Chris?
I was just going to say, I know in Denver, with kind of trying to get word out that, you know, we're surveying in a neighborhood and to get people to kind of engage with us, we've kind of had to look at some different options. And one of the things that continually comes up is the Nextdoor app. And for these, you know, little neighborhood pockets where people, you know, people have gotten away from Facebook and Twitter so much because of, you know, privacy issues and all of that kind of stuff. And so Nextdoor has been a route that we've been looking into, because people kind of all communicate with their neighbors that way. And so if we're standing out in front taking a picture of their building, then, you know, all of a sudden all the neighbors are like, hey, what's going on? There's this person standing outside my house with a mask on taking a picture of my place. And so, you know, maybe looking at some of those, you know, less traveled routes of, you know, very specific neighborhood social media might be another option to kind of throw it out, like, hey, this affects you and what's going on in your neighborhood. And maybe that's a way to draw in, you know, at least a handful of new people from different pockets around the city.
Yeah, Chris, that's a great point. I know for the Envision seminars we did early on, we went out to neighborhood groups and meet and greets, and it was you know, we were as staff, we were able to kind of
interact
of that, yeah, with personal interaction, and that really helped. Yeah. This is a really different environment, and you know, we're kind of on a schedule, and you know, to get this project done, and the rezoning project that we're going through right now. I know Andrea and I have mentioned, you know, we've had several people who have called in, and we usually take that opportunity too, while you're on a personal phone call, to say, hey, did you know about the ULUC studios and you know, how this is going to affect you in a corridor and that type of thing, and try and build some excitement there. But it is a little more difficult to get that personal interaction in this environment.
Definitely.
Well, Nextdoor is a great idea. I look at Nextdoor, and Tri-County Health is always on Nextdoor. Arapahoe County is on Nextdoor. I mean, you see notifications all of the time from these entities. But when I just thought about it, you know, I really don't see the city of Littleton, and I don't see Envision. And I think that would be a terrific way to reach people who, you know, because it's the same gang on Nextdoor all the time, and that seems to be a pretty good communication vehicle. but I attended several of the live Envisions back in the day when you could actually have live things. And, you know, they were crowded, and it was a lot of, you know, you tended to recognize people who would go and participate. And I know that those people are interested, and they made the effort. You know, I think it's a lot easier to tune in on Zoom than it is to, you know, drive down to the museum or wherever it is and park and, you know, sit in those uncomfortable chairs for 2 hours. And yet they made that effort. And I don't see those same people on Zoom. And I'm wondering where they went and you know, how to reach them and bring them back. But it's a vexing issue, and I'm sure that y'all are thinking about it, but it would be really nice to you know, see some more faces in those sessions, because they are good. Yes, Andy.
It may be too late now in the process. Like you said, Mike, you're kind of on a timeline here, but I'm curious if you guys have been able to attend any virtual meetings of existing groups and do sort of a quick hit kind of attempt to get feedback, like the Lions Club or Hoodlum, or I don't know, there are various different stakeholders that tend to be involved in the community in different areas. And that's one option if you haven't already done it. You may have.
That's a great idea, Andy. No, we haven't, gosh, I'm familiar with the idea of kind of a meeting in a box where you're able to kind of disseminate information to different groups in their own meeting format. And we haven't reached out in that way, but that's a great idea. And we can bring that to our communications division and also to Kathleen Osher, who's the project manager, and see if we can incorporate some of those ideas as well. But I think that's a great idea.
Sure, in their spare time, I'm sure they can squeeze that in. But maybe a shortened version too, that's just asks a few more directed questions.
Yeah.
Or just talk about, you know, the Zoom studios and make sure people are aware of them and that they can participate. So is there anything else from community development that we should know?
Andrea?
Yeah. So I wanted to let the board know that the city's received an application for the Santa Fe Park property, also known as the Ensor property, also known as the property where the barn is, down on South Santa Fe. So there's a historic barn. There's also a historically significant house on the property. And Toll Brothers is proposing to develop it with some housing and reserve some land for commercial development as well. They had the barn on their plan set, and we have opted not to refer it to HPB quite yet because the applicant is just trying to figure out what the options are and what they can do. And we're talking with them. We've had a 1 hour long conversation, and I think there will be some more. And once they kind of get beyond step one with their knowledge, then and have some ideas, then we're going to schedule them for HPB. They'll make a presentation. You'll have an opportunity to understand what the project is and provide some feedback to them.
Yes, Laura.
So Andrea, so they've closed on the property and now own it?
I don't believe that they've closed on the property. I believe they're under contract, and I think they're waiting to get some city entitlements before that happens.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
All right. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, and then there's one other project I wanted to give an update on. And I've mentioned this many months ago that a gas station is coming to Littleton Boulevard. and it's a Murphy's oil station, and it's very close to approval at this point, and it is going to necessitate the demolition of 2 buildings on Littleton Boulevard. And one is the motor bank at 181 West Littleton Boulevard. It's the brick building, the drive-through bank that's been vacant for some time. And then the other property is the one to the east, which in the survey is known as Brock's Eating House, 89 West Littleton Boulevard. And I think Gravina's was located there for a period of time. And so, unfortunately, those buildings will be lost. I did, in researching the property a little bit more, I came across something that surprised me, which is that before these 2 mid-century modern buildings were there, this was the site of a one-room schoolhouse, School District 6, Littleton Public Schools. And we have a historical photo, and I'll send it out to you.
Okay, so the as far as the motor bank building, that was what tier was that in the in significance? It was a tier 1, and yeah, and they have no interest in trying to incorporate that into the plan.
No,
it's tier 2.
It's a tier 2. I love that building personally, but so that's kind of a done deal.
It is. It's administrative approval, and as I think you all know, unfortunately, there are no protections for those mid-century modern buildings on Littleton Boulevard.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm sorry to hear that, but.
Andrea's been the case manager for that project, and she's worked with the applicant to try to. It's a gas station, so it's a little bit difficult to fit into the historic character of Littleton Boulevard. But Andrea's worked with them fairly closely to make the development fit in as best it can. With the architecture of the surrounding community. And also we worked with them early to turn the gas station so that it has more of it's easier to walk up to from Littleton Boulevard. So there have been a lot of work with the applicant to try and make it the best it can be. And although we might lament the loss of the drive-up bank building, it had fallen under disrepair. Not that it couldn't be saved, but it's also, we can welcome a new business to that area, which is there's pluses and minuses, but I'd like to try and welcome a new business whenever we can.
Yeah, I'll just chime in that what we were able to work on is that the convenience store originally came in as being kind of a synthetic stone exterior, and we were able to get them to go to a stacked brick design. And they have some convenience stores with kind of I guess it's plastic, a red plastic thing around the front door. And to me, out of all the designs that I could find online, that was the one that kind of had the funness about mid-century design to it. It's a really big red plastic thing. It's decorative. And so we're going with that. And then as for the canopy, they originally started with one that was really very, very thick. And I was able to get that narrower down to kind of reduce the impact of it all. So it's not going to be, I'm not going to say it's going to be totally fitting in, but we did work with it. And as Mike said, it's a good, it's a good addition to the city.
Well, one of the things that I'm sure that somebody is working on, but it's extremely important, is to document what is there. So we need excellent photos of the Motor Bank building and Brock's Eating House.
Yes.
And I think that there are also some trees on the property that I will be sorry to see leave.
Yes, we worked to try to save as many of those, and only a precious few will remain.
Okay, yes. So the photography and documenting it is going to be important. Yes, Chris.
I was going to say, I think this just kind of reiterates the fact that we really need to pay attention to our resources on the mid-mod mile, and this is why some of them need to be designated, so that this doesn't become the catalyst for more demolition of those resources and more modern, like brand new stuff going in to replace that. We do have such an amazing intact collection of mid-century buildings along Littleton, as we all know. And, you know, we had that survey done, and you know, yes, we can't preserve every single building on Littleton Boulevard, and that's not what we're here for. But, you know, there are some outstanding buildings, and we don't want to lose those, because this was, you know, the first domino that got tipped. So.
Yes, Rick.
So this is where perhaps exploring a historic overlay zone would be really good for Littleton Boulevard in our planning process right now, where it identifies it as a historic area, but doesn't call out the buildings yet, but lets people know that this is important whenever they do development. This would be the third Sternberg building to be lost on Littleton Boulevard, the Brock Eating House. I don't think he would view that as one of his greatest pieces of architecture, but it is the third Sternberg building to be torn down. But I was wondering, on documentation, have you asked them to document the buildings, and what would that entail?
Well, I have asked developers in the past and have come back with poor results, with the exception of one. This group, I don't think, is really too much into it. And so the city has some excellent cameras, and I've got a little bit of skill. So it'll be me.
Is there, have you looked in the files anywhere to see if there's any plans, particularly of the Motor Bank?
Yeah.
The Brock Eating House, that's not all that great. But if we had drawings or plans of the motor building, at least we could put them in the museum as a record. I mean, I recorded buildings for my career with Historic American Building Survey. That is a way of preserving buildings.
I was just going to ask about that, Rick. Like, maybe you could be involved in the documentation of it, since you did it.
Yeah, I will take a look. Generally, our building permit records go back to the early 80s, is unfortunately all we have. But there is a possibility of searching through some older scan files that the city has. It'll be a little bit like needle in the haystack, but it is possible. I'll take that on.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be, well, really good photographs would be good, I guess, as much as we can. We just haven't done that in Littleton. And that needs to be maybe part of our ordinance, is documentation. I have pictures of a lot of buildings that have been torn down. I take them before they're torn down. But it's a shame. It's just going to be paving. I know you're working really hard on it, but it's a gas station. It's just paving. What else can it be? Cars got to drive around.
That Motor Bank building, I'll tell you that the landscaping around it, and I mean, I've kind of idly dreamed of what would it be like to move that building, and you know, you could adapt that to any number of uses, even residential. But yeah, I think taking some good pictures of it. Let's take advantage of the good weather and try to do that.
Yeah.
That corner has changed so much in the last 30 years. It is absolutely unbelievable. You wouldn't even recognize it. There was a farm school or something like that where Ralph's shop is. I mean, tons of trees and stuff are sitting on that corner. And the shopping center has been redone twice, torn down and rebuilt twice since I've lived here. I mean, it'll be a shock though, but what are you gonna do? All right. Sadness. We can all pray for the building.
Okay.
And it is only one of our 4 Unisonian buildings. That's even more a shame.
Yeah, and I think it was the best. Absolutely,
but we don't know
best.
who the architect is. That's the problem. So. Okay.
Well, is there a positive note that we could end this section on?
Well, that was all the items that I had. Sorry, they came out in that order. But thank you everyone again for all the work on the Downtown Historic District and the work groups. This is going really well.
Okay, yes, indeed. And then board members with any projects that we are working on. Anybody have any updates? Yes, Miss Lisa.
Yeah, I just wanted to update people that all of the information has been given to the city's GIS staff, and so for the Littleton Legacy List. And she said it should be done within a couple days, so we would get to see what it looks like with all the photos in it. And Laura worked with the museum to get the historic photos, and I was so excited when I saw them because it's just awesome to see, and I can picture what it's going to look like on the Legacy List map. So I'm excited to see the final product, and I'll share it once I get it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, Laura, for doing that. That's great. And any other projects that are ongoing that we need to update? Yes, Rick?
So Historic Littleton has just awarded their contract to a web developer to redo our website. And we got a grant from the city, a CARES grant for $2,000 to help us. So we'll be rebuilding the entire website. And part of it's going to be integrating with Littleton's historic preservation website so we can tie together, but it'll be another way for us to get information out to the community about preservation work. So
excellent.
I'm really looking forward to it because a lot of people, they just start downloading into Littleton and our website doesn't work. And we'll be tying it to Instagram, Twitter. I'm getting younger people on the board. So we're getting it all tied together. And it'll be a great way for us to reach out to the community and vice versa. So it'll be much more interactive. It'll be really good. And so Lisa, your little project will be linked right to our website as well. So we'll be trying to do those links as much as we can because it's kind of hard to go to the city website and find stuff, but I think we could link it and make it easier for people to get to. So hopefully in about 3 or 4 months, that will be done. Then everybody can join Historic Littleton.
That's good. Yeah, I'll tell you, that's been a long time coming. You've been working on that for a long time. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
And then, and one thing that I would just like to share, on Saturday, when it was 40 degrees and the wind was blowing 60 miles an hour, Rick and I, along with 2 people from the Next Gen Committee, which is the younger folks in Littleton that are participating, the Next Generation Committee, just participating in understanding how the city works and giving their opinions and expertise and ideas. And a couple of those folks from their zoning group are very interested in the Littleton Boulevard corridor, and specifically in understanding the corridor and possibilities in the corridor, and providing input to the Envision corridor study. And their desire is to provide input before the document is done, rather than just responding to the plan when it comes out. And they wanted to learn more about Littleton Boulevard, with an eye towards what development and economic development opportunities lie there. And they wanted to know how they could help us on historic preservation with the corridor. And they're very interested. It's a very motivated group that, you know, they want to work and help us, you know, with awareness for the Littleton Boulevard corridor and learn more about it themselves. So, you know, we spent several hours, we were out there for 3 hours, you know, walking the street and talking about the buildings and talking about possibility. And it was really good. They're an impressive group, and you know, we came away with ideas on both sides, I think. Do you have anything to add to that, Rick?
No, it was good. It was windy, very windy that day, but the Next Gen have been really involved, and they write these very detailed reports to present to the city. And we talked a little bit about Instagram. And so what I told them to do was use Instagram to get their friends along the corridor participating in what's going on. So, because it's not going to be easy, particularly when we ended our walk, which was at Elady Street. And of course, Chris lives right nearby as well. We have a big residential area there. It's not going to want any change to happen across the street. So it's going to be a big deal. But I think they'll be very good at getting more people involved. And one thing they even mentioned was the coffee shop that's gone in a corner of Gallup and Littleton Boulevard. I still have to call the owner, but we may set that up as a central area to talk about mid-century modern. And if the owner agrees, put up posters and use that as a starting point for walking the street. It's right in the middle, which is really good. So is it Nixon's? Can't remember what the name of the coffee shop is, but.
It's Lost Coffee.
Lost Coffee, yes. And a potentially historic gas station, by the way. So.
And the one thing that was really interesting was these folks that just joined us, because there could only be 2 of them. They live in the area. They live north of, you know, a little bit west and then north of Littleton Boulevard. And their ideas for what they would like to see and how people want to use Littleton Boulevard are quite interesting. It's not, in their minds, they don't see it as, you know, just apartments, buildings marching down the street. They want to see accessible retail, you know, the restaurants, coffee shops, those kinds of things. And they want, their thought is, well, we wouldn't mind a grocery store closer, you know, Woodlawn-ish, because, you know, from a walking perspective, King Soopers is kind of a long ways down there at Littleton and Broadway. So, you know, they're thinking of, you know, something that is much more local and much more walkable. And it's kind of cool, you know, seeing Littleton Boulevard as, through their eyes, part of the neighborhood instead of just this, you know, transit corridor or, you know, some of the other ideas that have come up for Littleton Boulevard. So it was a nice perspective and a nice view. Let's see. I don't see anything else on our agenda. Does anyone have something they want to say or throw out or talk about before we adjourn? Mike does.
One quick follow-up. I was just chatting with Ben and Tyler and our AV crew. They might be able to do a drone flyover of the drive-through bank building, possibly, which could be really, you know, Ben's an amateur photographer. Tyler has a drone. We may be able to use those resources to document the building in kind of a different way.
That is cool. That would be very interesting. That would be very interesting.
And I also
how soon is all of this supposed to happen as far as like demolition of the buildings?
Andrea, you're on mute.
They don't have their demo permit yet, but I imagine it could be in the next week or two. So we'll need to move quickly.
So we need to mobilize quickly and get some documentation going as soon as possible.
And I do have, when I did the mid-century mod walk, the video for the tours this summer, the online tour, we did walk around that building and I asked them to video that as well. So we have video that I can get from them because I knew that this project was probably going to be going through, Andrea, we've been talking about for a while. So they did walk around and video it as well. So the more we can get, the better. But the drone would be really good because it shows the landscaping.
Yeah.
And the plan, the way the whole thing is just laid out there on the street. So. Good.
Okay, well, that, Mike, is very positive news to end this meeting on. So if there isn't anything else that anybody wants to talk about, we should go ahead and adjourn. It's 8:18. That's not bad. So yeah, thank you all very much for being here tonight. And thanks for all your participation in the many projects that are going on and will go on. And I'm really excited about moving forward with the historic preservation plans that we have. So we'll all, I guess, see you next month.
Yeah.
All right. We're done. We're adjourned.